This is the Personal Finance Show.
Hi, I'm Bo Humphreys, and this is the Personal Finance Show. There are two main types of investing, active and passive. Active investing is typically for people who have a deep understanding of the investments they're working with. They're trying to time the market by buying an investment when it's low and growing it to the point where it's grown enough to achieve whatever profit goals they set. Then they sell that product for a profit. The classic buy low, sell high strategy. You have to be paying attention to what's going on in the world and be ready for quick movement to avoid losses. There are people who are very good at this, but it's highly risky and not for everyone. Passive investment is when you buy something and hold onto it. You pay attention as it grows over the years, and you control your overall risk by keeping your investments balanced based on the amount of risk you're willing to accept. A typical passive investment is an exchange-traded fund or index fund. Passive investment can be done through robo advisors automatically. They take care of the risk management for a small fee. Or you can open a brokerage account and do it yourself. Typically, passive investors fall into these two categories. Either you just want to keep it simple and live your life, so you pay a robo advisor 0.5% and they take care of everything. Or you decide you want control of your investments and also want to try to save money on fees and do it all yourself. Usually this type of person enjoys monitoring their investments and taking a hands-on role, at least on a semi-regular basis. But what if you fall somewhere in the middle? You don't want to spend a lot of time on your investments, but you also want to have full control and try to minimize your fees. Brendan Wood and Brendan Lee Young fall into this category. They wanted to invest their own money, but realized there were so many tedious tasks that still have to be done manually through their online brokerage. So they created a tool to automate all the manual stuff, a kind of Swiss Army knife for do-it-yourself investors. Both Brendans joined me from the province of New Brunswick to share their personal finance stories and talk about their new portfolio management tool, Passive.
Relatively poor. Growing up, my mother would always tell me the importance of saving at least 1/3 of my salary, or in this case, allowance, so that I can use it to pay for education or buy that Nintendo 64 that I want, right?
Yeah.
So she'd always encourage me to save my allowance. And I'd like to say that I always listened to her, but I did not. So I always found more useful things to do with my money, like buy clothes or go to the movies. So while it's always been reinforced to me that saving is very important, I can't say that I did a good job up until when I started going to university. And so when I started university, all of those lessons that my mother would be teaching me about sort of came back front of mind, because I'd have to budget more effectively in terms of how much money I'm going to spend this week. I probably should not go to the bar. And so being an international student is what really reminded me of some of these previous lessons that my mother would have shared with me growing up.
And before that, when your mom was like, do this, do that, you're like, forget it, Mom, I'm going to spend my money.
Well, I basically, yeah, you could say so. Geez, I sound like a bad kid. But yeah, I mean, when you're 10 or 12 years old, you know, you're not thinking long term. You're thinking about that GoldenEye game that just came out and you want to play with your friends. And
exactly. Well, but what kind of money did you even have at that time?
Man, I would have had the equivalent to maybe 100 Canadian dollars that took me 6 months to save up. But like I said, I'd be saving to get to that number to buy, let's say, GoldenEye, but I'd always get maybe halfway there and spend it on something else, like the circus would come to town, or there'd be a really cool movie that I wanted to see, and so I'd spend it.
So typical kid stuff, but the stuff that your mom taught you just kind of stayed in you somewhere, and when you got to university and realized maybe are we running off savings or a student loan?
Yeah, so I was running off of savings at that point, and it's really, really challenging when you see your bank account and every month it just goes down gradually, knowing that nothing is coming back in.
Believe me, I know the feeling.
So that's my experience. University helped me. Fortunately, when I noticed that my money was shrinking, I looked for creative ways to top some of those funds back up. And so I got into DJing and promoting parties on campus there. And so that saved me, and it actually put a bit more money into my accounts than I would have thought. So it worked out, but there's nothing more than psychologically watching your money go down, and then you start to question your expenses and, could I be saving more, and should I be buying this, and is it good to be drinking or going out to the bar every week? Then you start thinking about those sort of questions. And that was sort of my journey with money as I grew up, and that extended into my adult life. And now I have a full-time job, and so I've brought those principles with me as I grew up now.
And so you, watching your savings go down, you saw, I need to do something about this, and you were like, I have DJ skills, and you started this side hustle. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically, when I calculated the time it would take me to, let's say, work a bare minimum, well, like a basic job that paid $10 an hour, to go on Facebook and create an event and invite 300 or 400 friends, and $10 a head, you'd make a lot more compared to spending 20 hours a week at $10 an hour. So I not only looked to limit how much my cash was being burnt on a monthly basis, but also I looked for ways to optimize the amount of money I would make based on the time that I spent. And so just because I had some DJ skills and, I knew how to talk to people on campus and make friends, it genuinely paid out. Being a Trinidadian, people always want to party with Trinidadians, and Trinidadians love to party. So I found a win-win.
Yeah, sounds like a win-win. So, okay, both of your names are Brendan.
Yeah.
So,
not to confuse you or anything.
Yeah, no, exactly. Okay, so I was talking to Brendan, and what should we call you? Brendan, what's the last name?
I'm Brendan Lee Young, and you can call Brendan...
I'm Brendan Wood.
Okay, so I'll say, can I just say Brendan Lee and Brendan Wood to make it easy?
Sure, go for it.
Works for me.
Okay. Okay, so that was Brendan Lee, and now Brendan Wood. What's your early money memory?
So I grew up in St. John's, and I guess if you'd ask my family about it, they would probably tell you that I have a bit of a reputation for thinking about money a lot, especially when I was a kid. I mean, I never had gobs of it, but when I would get it, I would just, rather than, burning it quickly, I always had this inclination to squirrel it away and save it and use it for something really special at some point.
And who taught is this in your genes?
I imagine my parents had something to do with it. They were both, very frugal individuals. But, it was early enough that I don't really recall. I mean, my mother tells this story about this particular family reunion or something that we went to when I was probably 6 or 8 years old. And I have no recollection of this. But, when I was there, I found some other kid, and I wanted to spend some money on a treat or something. And I found this kid who I apparently had lent money to at some point in the past, and was like, hey, I'm going to call on that loan now. And he gave me, a few dollars back, and I used that to go buy a treat. And it just completely blew away everyone around me that A, I had done that, and B, I remembered enough, and then C, the kid actually also remembered and paid back. That's kind of insane at such an early age.
So you just would you just make sure you had people all over town that you could collect money from? I
guess so. I mean, I don't think I explicitly did that. People would just be like, hey, can I borrow some lunch money? And sure, I'll give you some lunch money. And then, a month or two later, I might say, hey, I want a chocolate bar. Can you hook me up? Right. So,
and you just had it all in your head, or did you keep a book?
No, I didn't have a book. It must have all been in my head. So
you started out, you were like an early loan shark, but you didn't charge them
really high interest rates. Or
yeah.
anything.
Okay. But what if was there anyone who didn't pay you back?
Oh yeah. Lots of people who didn't pay me back. I've got a short list of names who never paid me back from high school. And
they're not getting any favors today, right?
No, I'm not even in touch with most of them, so it's all good.
That's right.
Large amounts of money. It's like $5 here, $10 there, right?
Yeah, but you know. Yeah.
I know. I don't know why I know. I don't know why it matters, but I know.
And they'll be like, why didn't I get that promotion? And they'll have no idea. Pay your debts. That's the lesson here. Pay your debts no matter how small. Actually, pay the smallest ones first, because they're easy, right? I mean, we could talk about different methods of debt repayment, but that's another podcast completely.
Exactly.
So you're squirreling all your money away, and you're getting through high school doing this too?
Yeah, exactly. I always tried to have like some kind of like side income, even when I was a kid. when I was in sixth grade, I started this little business in my school where I was selling these rice balls. So you basically they were kind of like stress relievers, but made with rice, and they had balloons and stockings around them and stuff. So they felt really cool. They looked cool. They were pretty simple to make, but nobody else really knew how to make them except me. So I made a couple and brought them to class one day. And some of my friends were like, "Oh, that's really cool. Can I have one of those, or can you show me how to make it?" It's like, "Yes, in fact, I can make one for you for a small fee." And so I started making these things, and they got really popular, and I was taking custom orders. I probably made a few $100s off it. And then some other kids caught on and realized that they were missing out on this grand opportunity of, making money off of 12-year-olds. So they started making their own cheap knockoff versions of my stress relievers, and eventually got it banned by the school, and that kind of shut down the whole thing.
Well, they ruined it for you.
They did.
You had this nice niche thing going on, and you had the idea. It's kind of like Apple and Microsoft. Would you compare yourself to Apple?
As 12 years old? Yeah, sure. We can go with that.
Well, that's pretty awesome. Not everybody thinks of ways to make that kind of cash when they're 12 years old. But did it just go from there? Did you keep coming up with ideas, or was that a one-off thing?
Like it wasn't like I always had something going on, but if I kind of stumbled across something that was interesting and I enjoyed doing, I would do it. When I was in high school and later in university, I used to do tutoring to kind of bring in a little bit of extra money and help pay the bills. The one that I found worked the best was doing group sessions. So, one-on-one tutoring is fine, but it's just kind of like a big hassle for the amount of money you make. Like you need to get people interested in being tutored, and then they're going to hire you, and then they probably want to meet you first, and sometimes you got to meet their parents, and then you decide on a rate, and then you book a meeting, and then you meet with them for an hour, and then maybe you have $15, So it's like a lot of work for a relatively small amount of money.
Okay.
But I found that doing group things was a lot better. So in university, I used to run these review sessions for courses that I had previously done, and charge people $5 a pop to come for the midterm or final review. It's a relatively small amount of money per head, but when you get 50 or 100 people in the room, it worked out really well to pay my rent for the month.
That's a great idea. Like you get everybody in it just for the one time, but It's something that's valuable to everyone, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, it's not like you could do it every day. It's definitely opportunistic. You can only do it, like not once or twice, but maybe like 4 or 5 times a semester. It's definitely a nice little boost that kept me going and helped cover tuition costs and stuff.
So you guys met at university then?
No. we actually met at a friend's diaper party last year.
Okay, so you guys both went through university, and so Brendan Lee, you stayed in New Brunswick.
Yeah, so I came to Canada thinking that I'd only be gone from Trinidad and Tobago for 1 year. So I said, no big deal. Spent the first year studying, and once I was done, I decided I wanted to stay here. And so I've been in Canada for almost 10 years now, and I would have met Brendan last year. So even though we were in the same town, our paths never crossed up until last year at that diaper party.
Yeah. Sorry, I skipped over this, and I'm not sure why. What is a diaper party?
I'll let you take that one, Brendan.
So when you've got a new baby on the way?
Yes.
It's kind of like a baby shower,
Sure.
That it's often, I guess it happens more frequently for men, I guess. So women will have the baby shower, men will have a diaper party or something like that.
I see. And, it sounds gross. It sounds like a gross party, but these are unused diapers, I hope.
Absolutely unused, yeah. But just, everyone comes and they bring a pack of diapers, and then, the new parents end up with enough diapers to last them for a few months, hopefully.
That's pretty great. That's a great idea, actually. And then everybody knows what to bring. And you're not bringing, here's a shirt that they can wear in 3 years. You're bringing something people can use right now.
Exactly.
That's smart. So you guys had a mutual friend then?
Yeah.
And you don't have to name them. And we'll keep them anonymous, unless you really need to plug them for some reason. Give them some diapers. They need more diapers probably, right?
Well, actually, I think that was for their last kid. I don't think they have it anymore.
Okay.
But perhaps that there is a blog post on diaper parties and how you can save money by having your friends buy diapers, because they're apparently really expensive.
Yeah, it definitely. This is a future blog post, and I'm making notes right now. So you guys meet and you start talking about your mutual interests. And so what are you both doing for a living at this point for money?
So work for a small company called Priceonomics. So we're a startup company and we do content marketing services. So we have, a web platform that does analytics for blogs. And then we also have like higher end services that's like full service content marketing campaigns. So that's my full-time job. I'm a software developer there and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. But I've also kind of like had this entrepreneurial spirit for a long time. So, I used to work for another startup company here in Fredericton, Radian 6. And I'm always kind of interested in the next big thing. And so that's why that's kind of like the circles I find myself running in. And the people I tend to hang out with are, people who kind of think the same sort of way. And Brendan was there and I, never met him before. And we just started chatting it up. And lo and behold, he has a degree in entrepreneurship and, he's super interested in the startup space. And so we just started, talking to each other about thoughts and ideas we have and all that stuff.
It just so happens, Bo, that Brendan's idea for passive was, in relation to, helping Canadians save more for retirement. And, I had a limited background in investing because I took a course at university called value investing. Mm-hmm. And, I found it very interesting because I thought that I could use the stock market to make money. And it stems from another story in my days because I used to gamble in my early 20s. And one day I woke up and I realized, well, geez, like that doesn't make sense. If you want to save more money, maybe invest in the stock market. So anyway, I took this course. One of the interesting things in this course was that instead of actively trying to beat the market, you can buy a low-cost index fund and get the market returns. And that really resonated with me. And so when Brendan and I got chatting and he told me about this idea he had and what he was doing, I jumped at it because I fully believe in, just buying the markets and not trying to, actively manage your money to beat the market. So it was sort of fated at that point.
Well, I found it really interesting that you were able to learn some of this in school. I have a general business degree and I had some finance courses, but we talked mostly about derivatives and high level stuff, like if you're going to be a trader or something like that, and it would just all seemed way over my head, for in a personal finance sense. Sounds like you had a little bit more of a personal finance angle.
Yeah, I took personal financial planning back in Trinidad, and
nice.
I liked the idea of investing, but not investing other people's money, just investing on my own, because I think it's important. And all the books out there sort of tell people that if you want to make money, you got to learn to invest your money wisely. And what better way to invest your money wisely than buying the best companies in the world and holding them for a very long time?
Yeah, I think you're right. Just a little tiny piece of each one, right? So that if one of them goes down, you're not stuck in the gutter. So Brendan Wood, how did you get into, how did you learn about investing, or where did you start putting your money when you were making it at first?
So when I got my first job, I started by paying down the debt that I had. I had some small, like a student line of credit that had to be paid off. And then the company had RRSP contribution matching. And so I put a little bit of money in there.
That's smart. So 100%, of 5% of your salary?
Yeah, I think it was about 5%. Whatever. I mean, I wasn't making huge money or anything either, right? So it started adding up slowly though.
But we should take a moment and just make sure everyone knows that it's the best investment you can make, because you're immediately getting 100% return on your investment, no matter
Absolutely.
how well the actual investments do.
Yep, that's right. They double your money if they have this contribution matching thing. So it's a really sweet deal to take advantage of.
Yeah, so that's our PSA on employer matching. Please do it. Okay, now back to you.
Basically, I was just kind of putting my money away in there. And I guess the thing is, I'm a software developer, and there's not a lot of unionization or pension schemes that are available to software developers these days. Like maybe if you're working for a great big old company, they might have something that'll suit you. Or if you're working for the government, general private sector tech companies, you don't tend to see a lot of that, right?
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, so even with contribution matching on your RSP, it's still like they'll match your contribution and you still need to decide what to do with it. You haven't just handed it off to a pension manager to take care of it. So you need to think about what your risk tolerance is. You need to think about your target retirement date. And, the default places where they let you put your money as a part of these plans are often with relatively high fee mutual funds. And I wasn't particularly educated on the time, so I kind of I looked at the fees that I was paying. I was like, well, 1.5%, 2%, that's not so much, right? It's a pretty small amount. When you think about that amount compounding over time and like being taken away every year, it really kind of adds up. So eventually I did the math on it and was just shocked to see how much of my savings were going to disappear to these management fees.
So you decided to do something about it.
Yeah,
you decided to learn more about investing on your own?
That's right, yeah. So it was probably Reddit's personal finance community that got me into it originally. So they're pretty big proponents of passive investing and index investing and that sort of stuff. So I think it was the Canadian Couch Potato blog that I eventually found my way to and, read through all the theory behind it and why this works. And, I was really sold on it. I was like, really, if I just do this myself in my own brokerage account, I can end up saving a lot of money over the course of my career.
Yeah, it's Dan Bortolotti, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
he's really put it together over the years to give people easy ways to get started. I mean, I think the easiest option that he has is just go and get a Tangerine index fund. If you're not sure what to do, here's your easy start. Just start, right?
Yeah, so I considered doing some of the simpler options where they have mutual funds or whatever that have very low fees and you can kind of put your money into, or the TDE series. And I guess I decided like that's kind of like a nice place to be, but I wanted to do the full thing at some point. So I figured why not just, go 100%, open a brokerage account and get started. So I started doing that and very quickly discovered that it's really tedious. Like I had 3 different accounts. So I had an RRSP, a tax-free savings account, and an RESP for the kids. I had monthly contributions going into each of them. And then there were dividends coming in every now and then. And with the RESP, there are these government top-ups that come in maybe, 3 or 4 weeks after you make a contribution. And so with all these different transactions happening, that money needs to be allocated. And there's no kind of notification system to tell you when the money's available or when trades are able to be made, right? So I just found myself, spending way too much time just clicking refresh and waiting for the money to hit. And then when it did hit, you got to run the calculations to decide where to put your money such that it keeps you as close to your target as possible. And none of it is really difficult to do. It's just tedious. And I'm not a fan of tedious tasks. As a software developer, I take it as my personal mission in life to destroy tedious things.
You got to automate.
Exactly. So I found out that my brokerage, which is Questrade, had an API. And I thought, well, I've built software against APIs before. Let's give this a try. And so really the first version of Passive was a simple Python script, probably about, 50 lines of code that I would just run every month. And it would basically connect to my brokerage account, and it would read my assets, and it would compare it to a target portfolio and basically tell me what trades I should make in order to keep myself as close to that target as possible.
Let's take a couple of steps back there. So not everyone knows what an API is. Can you explain that?
Right. So API is it's an acronym for Application Program Interface.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. So the idea is that with these APIs, they provide a way for developers outside of an organization to write code that interacts with the organization. So if I wanted to, write some custom code to automate a certain portion of my portfolio, I could write software that talks to this API. So there's, an authentication procedure where, the brokerage will validate that you are who you say you are and that you've authorized this access. And then it gives you access to certain things, like I can read the balances of each of my accounts, and I can read the holdings of my accounts, and I can look at my trade history and all those different things.
So they basically provided you a way in to their, I guess it's software for Questrade. So you're able to use your software skills to get in there and integrate and then make something of your own with, which you said Python, which is a programming language as well?
Yep, exactly.
And so you built, what did you build at first? What was the first iteration? Was it called Passive at the time?
Like a little tiny script. It was just a few lines of code that basically would take this flat authorization token and send it along to Questrade to say, hey, this is me. Let me in and give me access to my account. And then I would read my assets and then look at the prices of the current holdings on the market and compare it to what my target portfolio is. And then just do the calculation of what I would need to do in order to get back in, as close to that target as possible. So it was super simple. It was on the order of 50 lines of code. It took me a weekend to write, or even less than that. And it was just, it worked for me, and it helped a lot. And that was the first version. And I actually never had any plans to kind of expand upon it because it worked for me. It did what it needed to do, and it wasn't going to change, until I showed it some friends, and they said, well, this is actually really cool. I think I might be able to use this. Is there some way I can use your code? I'm like, yeah, sure. Here's the code. You can just run it yourself. Right. And, eyes glaze over. People who don't write software, probably right. So, obviously that wasn't a good solution for most of the people who were interested. So I said, I'll spend a few more weeks at it, and I'll just kind of throw up a very simple web interface and take it from there. I did that, and it's just kind of like compounded. And, the more people I show, the more people have been interested in helping out and using it for themselves. And so now it's like, we're in a place where we're getting lots of feature requests. And so we're having to prioritize, well, should we do this? And if we are going to do it, how do we do it? And, which one comes first, that sort of thing.
And so let's just pause and talk a little bit about the importance of allocation and why, and being able to reallocate. So let's just say you're starting out and you're going to buy a couple of index funds or exchange traded funds. You're making yourself a portfolio. Maybe give us an example portfolio, and then what you would do when it all kind of grows out of balance.
Sure. Okay. So to give you an example, I use the Canadian Couch Potato Assertive Portfolio, I think. So that basically says you put 50% of your assets in global equity, so like global stocks.
Okay.
25% of your assets in Canadian stocks, and you put another 25% of your assets in Canadian bonds.
Okay.
So that's like a kind of like, it's a fairly balanced approach.
But forget the United States. They're maybe part of the global one, but...
Yeah, exactly. Probably a lot of the global portion ends up in the United States just because they're so huge.
So it's like you're getting a little exposure to risk, global risk. You're staying just a quarter in Canadian, and then the other quarter in bonds, because bonds are more of a conservative investment, and they usually go the other way when stocks go down. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, it's basically like a hedge on a couple sides, right? So first of all, you've diversified by buying index funds all over the world and in different markets, right? And then you've got half of your assets outside of Canada, half of your assets inside Canada. And then within your assets inside Canada, half of those are in very conservative bonds, which, like you said, kind of tend to do the opposite of stocks. And so it kind of will average out the effects and try to take the edge off of really sharp swings in the market.
Okay, so you got 50 and 25 and 25, and then I don't know, a year goes by or 6 months. When do people typically rebalance their portfolios?
So it really depends. From what I understand, you shouldn't be rebalancing more than maybe annually, doing a full rebalance.
Okay.
And even then, you'd only really want to do it if your portfolio got really out of whack. So I've been doing this for a few years now, and I haven't had to do a single full rebalance yet. And the reason is because I'm making continuous cash contributions every month, and I use that cash to buy the underweight assets.
So you're making those decisions as you go.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. So, every time the calculation runs, it just looks at what my current holdings are compared to the portfolio, and it converts each to a percentage. So I might end up having, so if stocks did really well one particular month, I might find that I have 77% of my assets in stocks and only 23% in bonds. And then the calculation would basically say you need to use that money to buy bonds up to a certain point.
Okay, and is that part of passive, or is that just a quick spreadsheet calculation you would do?
That's a part of passive. So originally That was a spreadsheet calculation that I was doing, but having to do it every time cash hit my account was kind of painful to do, and do it for every account at that, because I'd have to be looking up market quotes and copying and pasting them, and then looking at my current holdings in my Questrade account and comparing that to what the recommended assets were and all that sort of thing, right? So
that's one way to use passive if you're continuously, which I mean, a lot of people should be just investing on a regular basis for the concept of dollar cost averaging.
It's kind of the default way to work with passive.
Sure. Okay. Oh, great.
Yeah, the Questrade has free buys of ETFs, and as long as you're continuously contributing, for the most part, you can just buy the underweight asset and you stay 100% aligned with your target in the long run. By default, passive tells you what the buy-only trades are. It'll never recommend that you sell anything unless you turn off that option.
So it's not necessarily, I mean, I'm sure people who have an amount that's just sitting there for years, can they use passive?
Oh yeah, definitely. So if you've got a bunch of money just sitting there, living with the market, and you're not really touching it very often, then you could just once a year look at your account and run this, run it through passive, and it'll tell you what your portfolio accuracy is. And, if you've fallen below, say 95%, maybe you'd consider doing a rebalance. And, you definitely don't want to do it too often because there's, transaction costs with doing it. You're going to lose whatever the bid-ask spread is on the assets you're buying and selling. And then there's also the per trade fees that you're going to pay on top of it. You don't want to do it too often. You want to only do it when your portfolio gets substantially out of whack.
What's the importance of rebalancing?
Risk mitigation. It's basically saying, well, you're going to diversify your portfolio and you diversify it according to a particular plan. So in my case, I say, well, half my assets are outside of Canada, half are inside Canada. And within my assets inside Canada, half of those are in bonds, half in stocks, right? So that's kind of what I've set as my target. And if that gets out of whack, then my the risk associated with my portfolio also gets a little out of whack.
Because you're taking a bit more risk in areas where you would not have liked to take risk.
So because bonds, stocks will typically outperform bonds in the long run. If your money just sits around, then over time your portfolio is probably going to become more heavily weighted towards stocks. And then it's also risky. Like if you've got all your money in the stock market, that is, one of the riskier ways to invest your money. So it's about just kind of keeping your portfolio in line with the plan you originally created for it. And if you, at some point you decide maybe you want to change that plan, if you're getting close to retirement and you want to be a little more conservative with your money, okay, you can change your asset mix and then do a rebalance and bring yourself back into alignment with your new target. It's kind of like a personal decision people need to make in accordance with their own financial goals.
So investing, it's not about chasing the wins and the losses. It's about setting up a plan first, like whatever you can tolerate, like your risk. You're like, I'm good with, 50% in Canada, 50% outside of Canada. I want my Canadian 50% to be split between stocks and bonds. I'm good with that. And I'm going to stick with it until maybe my life situation changes, I get older or things. But I'm not really caring how everything is doing because I'm here to just maintain my risk, not try to time things.
Yeah, you've put it perfectly. That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
And that's the concept of passive investing, and just not. It's the difference between investing and trading, I suppose. So this is what robo advisors do. Companies like Wealthsimple or Nest Wealth, and they do this for a fee. Why shouldn't people just go to the robo advisors?
Well, I would actually say that robo-advisors are not a bad option for most people. They do their job well. They do it at a substantial fraction of the cost of a mutual fund. It's not a horrible option to put your money into a robo-advisor compared with all the bad things you could do with it if you weren't. So we look at passive as kind of like a do-it-yourself robo-advisor. So if you put your money in with a robo-advisor, most of them don't give you a lot of flexibility in terms of how your money is allocated or where it sits and that sort of thing. They'll basically ask you a series of questions to assess your risk tolerance, and then they will put you in a bucket with other people with a similar risk tolerance and allocate your money in that, according to that plan. So in my experience, people have different goals for investing, and sometimes there are goals that conflict with each other. I intend to retire, but maybe I don't. Maybe I want to invest my money in a socially responsible manner. And if I have that goal of being socially responsible with my money, I can't put it in any standard robo-advisor because they just have, kind of like these risk buckets, and it has nothing to do with any of the social aspects of how the money is invested or what the companies are doing, in which the money is being invested. So with something like passive, you can basically construct your own portfolio as you see fit. You can include whatever you want and exclude whatever you don't want. And you can basically run it like a robo-advisor on top of your own brokerage account. So you're not relying on this third party to do it for you. So I guess the flexibility there is kind of the big feature that I like about passive. But there's also the cost aspect. We're kind of in the early stages of building our revenue model for passive. But at the moment, we're looking at doing an annual fee, like a software subscription. Mm-hmm. And it's a fee that doesn't change depending on how much money you're managing. So if you have your money with a robo-advisor, well, they charge you a management expense ratio that means you pay more as they manage more. When you only have maybe $10,000 or $20,000 in your retirement accounts, you won't be paying that much in fees. But if that grows to a substantial amount, like hundreds of thousands or millions, which is enough to retire on, then you end up paying substantially for it. So with passive, it's it doesn't really matter how much you manage. As long as you're above, about a $20,000 threshold, it's the cheaper option. And it does all the same calculations the same way they do.
I think for me, because I'm a value investor, I also, as Brendan said, want want flexibility. And with robo advisors, you are locked into the portfolios they offer. I want to be able to invest in, put a bit of my money in Apple, but not necessarily count that towards my total portfolio. And I don't want to have a separate Questrade account just to buy Apple. So I think that passive gives investors, do-it-yourself investors, a choice. I think it democratizes it to some degree, because there are tools out there that are designed for people who don't want to manage their money. But what about people who do? There aren't many tools out there, and so I think that we offer that happy medium across the spectrum.
Can you tell me a little bit more about just the basics of value investing and how you would integrate this into a passive portfolio?
I would do my own research on a company, let's say Apple. I'd look at their fundamentals, like their cash flow and, their net book value. Essentially, I'm trying to find a company that has been undervalued in the market by doing some analysis. And so I'd buy that company and I'd hold it for a really long time. So actually, in my opinion, value investing and passive investing is the same in the sense that you buy the asset or the company and you hold it for a very long period of time. And so that's sort of where I see a complementary sort of philosophy in that regard.
So it doesn't have to be, because when people think of passive investing, they think ETFs or index funds or things that are mimicking the markets. But you're saying that if you have some knowledge of the companies, if the intent isn't just to, let's use Netflix as an example, just buy Netflix and just wait till it grows or doubles and then sell it when it does. If the idea is to just hold it just like you're doing everything else, then it fits into the passive investing model, but you have a little bit more of a diversity and you're able to be a little more involved and make your own decisions.
Yeah, that's basically it. You hit the nail on the head. And of course, you want to invest in long companies that you believe are going to be around for a long time. And so that's the only other catch too. And that's why it fits in, because a company like, let's say, Apple or Microsoft, you presume that they'd be around for over 10 years, right? So that's why I think it fits with that passive investing philosophy, because most passive investors, they hold their money, I think, for a period of over 5 years, right? So in my opinion, makes a bit of sense there.
You don't want to be buying anything that you would need to call somebody up at the brokerage and cash out in an urgent manner. You want something that's, if it's going to go down in value or change, you'll get some warning and then you'll be able to make some decisions. So passive is for people, basically you want to have an interest in doing your own investing, first of all.
Yes, it's very, very important, I think, to have an interest in doing your own investing, because you still have to decide on your own portfolio. Like, we can't advise you on where to put your money. We're not advisors, so we can't tell you that.
Same here.
Yeah, you basically need to have enough interest to be able to figure out what you want to do with your money on like a low level scale. And then you have to have the interest to be able to keep up with it, right? So like anytime new cash hits your account, if you're with passive, you'll get a notification that says, hey, new cash hit your account. You may be able to allocate this. And it kind of gives you a prod to do that, but you still need to do it.
Or to that point, again, dividends, right? If you're a dividend investor and you receive dividends every quarter, that person may want to reinvest those dividends into the companies that are paying them dividends. And so therefore, passive also fits that use case quite nicely for someone, again, trying to build wealth, except just through following, let's say, dividend investing portfolios or philosophies.
So if you have a brokerage account at this point, just with Questrade, right? You guys are only integrated with them?
That's right, yeah.
And would there be plans to expand it to others? Do others have APIs, or is it just Questrade that happens to be open?
Some other brokerages have APIs, not all of them though. I don't think there's any other in Canada that have like a proper API that we can use the same way we use Questrade's API. There are a few in the US, so we're basically trying to develop relationships with those brokerages now to be able to do that. It's not like you could just build an application to talk to anybody's API, especially with brokerages. They're usually kind of selective about who is actually allowed to access it. So there's kind of like this relationship building that has to happen before we can even enter those other markets or support other brokerages.
Sure. And Questrade is if I were to do a roundup of brokerages, which I haven't and I'm not planning to, but if I were. I know that they're a good option in Canada. I mean, the other options are basically the rest of the banks, and Questrade is actually removed from Canadian banks, right?
Yeah, that's right. They're independent.
Mm-hmm.
That in itself, I mean, is a good reason to choose. But also, so you get your help from passive if you're going through Questrade. Maybe you're trying this yourself and you're like, this is so much work. You're like, oh, I want to go to a robo, but you're missing. You might miss the aspect of managing it yourself if that's the kind of investor you are, and that's where passive comes in to kind of take away the tedious tasks.
Yep. And so we're basically trying to build out passive to try to reduce the amount of tedious things you need to do to manage your investments like a robo-advisor would. So, for example, one of the features we're working on now, we're calling it one-click trades. So this is going to be an optional feature for users who want to do it. But the idea is when you go into passive, it kind of looks at your current holdings in your account and does a calculation to see what trades would need to be made in order to bring you into a full alignment with your targets. And if any trades are there, or let's say these are the trades that should be made, there's a little button that appears next to it that says, prepare these orders. And so you click that button, it goes to Questrade, it validates these orders to make sure that it's actually possible to make them and the markets are open and all that stuff. And then boom, you press the button and it just synchronizes your account. So this is something we have working in testing right now. And I've been using it on my own account for probably 3 or 4 months now. We haven't released it yet because we're talking to regulators to make sure that we're not crossing any lines we don't want to be crossing. In my opinion, that's like the one last big thing that's tedious for me in managing my investments is having to go and make the trades manually. But having this button will allow me to just kind of synchronize my account with my target whenever I want.
And a lot of products that are made these days are made because someone has a problem. In this case, it was you, and you just built something to fix it. And then other people said, oh, I like that. Can I try it? You've already proven that it's useful. And that's important because if it's useful to you, then you're going to keep on making these adjustments to it.
I think it's really important to use your own stuff. The term inside the industry would be like dog fooding, so like eating your own dog food. Okay. And if you don't do that, then you don't have a really deep understanding of your product or what problems it should be solving or what you should be doing to address these things. So yeah, it's super important that both Brendan and I are passive investors and we use our accounts to manage our investments and like that gives us a lot of insight. In fact, one of the things that I got from Brendan Lee here is that he has, because he's a value investor, right? He has some of his money in ETFs that he wants to manage passively according to a target. And then he also has some stocks that he's kind of like picked due to his value investing. So he's kind of done the math on these and said, well, these look like really good long-term companies that I can put my money in and be happy with for decades. So he'll buy them. And that's fine, but he doesn't necessarily want these included in a balance calculation. So he'll have bought, so many units of these stocks and then say, I'm cool with that, especially if it's like a relatively, low value relative to his overall portfolio. You don't really want to be balancing across that because it's just going to say, well, buy 1 unit this month and maybe sell 1 unit the next, right?
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
And not really productive. So he proposed the idea of having some sort of like exclusion list where you can basically see the holdings in your account. And if there's anything that you don't want to be included in the balance calculation, just check it off. And then you will never receive any recommendation to do anything with that particular holding. And that was I was kind of skeptical of that idea at first, but we've actually had probably about a dozen users come forward and say, this is something I really want. Like, yes, I'm a passive investor, but I also have a few companies I believe in my portfolio, and I'd like to be able to use passive more seamlessly.
To build on that, I think what we want to do is create a tool that's very flexible. So it's like a Swiss Army knife for do-it-yourself investors. And that's one of the key insights that we've seen is that even though you're a passive investor, some people treat their passive investments differently. And so we want to be flexible enough to support those diverse needs within our product.
Yeah, that's really smart.
Now, just going back to what Brendan said, I mean, Brendan comes from a computer programming background, and he obviously did the research and determined that passive investing and doing it yourself was good for him. Now, imagine someone like myself that knows about this a bit more and believes in passive investing, but does not have that skill set to create their own application to integrate with Questrade. Where does that leave guys like myself? Mm-hmm. And maybe you, right? surely on a Friday afternoon, I'm not looking forward to breaking open my Excel spreadsheet and tabbing in between websites just to calculate the trades I need. That's what I really think is neat about passive, and that, the good work that Brendan has done will be available to investors like us. We look forward to helping that community.
Yeah, it's perfect. And I think before I talked to you guys, the idea was, if you don't know what you're doing, you go robo. If you really know what you're doing and you want to get into it, and you do it yourself and go brokerage. And there's no real middle for anybody who's like, I don't want to spend all the do-it-yourself time, and I don't want to pay the fees or have the limited options of the robo. So it seems like you guys are creating a new category here.
That's kind of like, we do look at it to that extent. We wouldn't normally come forward and say that because it makes it harder for people to like frame what we're doing. But we do kind of see it fundamentally as like a new category. It's like, you can implement your own robo advisor to be whatever you want on top of your own brokerage account. It gives you full autonomy in how you manage your money and all the benefits of having a robo advisor. That's kind of what we're aiming towards.
So people need to basically have a Questrade account, and then they can just go. Where do they go to get passive? Is it something they can add on themselves, or? Yeah,
they can find us on the Questrade app. Partner Center in their app hub.
Nice.
So because we're a partner with Questrade, they can visit that page and find us, or they can go on our website at getpassive.com, and that's GETPASSIV.com. So we dropped the E in passive. Don't ask why.
It's all good. I mean, you wouldn't get good SEO otherwise. And I'll include all these links in the show notes so people will be able to click on them. Well, awesome, guys. Thanks for joining me today. This is a very interesting new way for people to get a little bit more help and to get into something that might be intimidating if that's what they want. It's just nice to have a lot of different options for investing, and but the key is just get started, right?
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, the earlier you start, the better.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having us on.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
If you like this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get podcasts. It would mean a lot to me, and it only takes a few seconds. For the show notes and any links from the episode, head over to my website, investwisely.ca. And while you're there, please feel free to send me a message on my contact page. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Personal Finance Show. I'll be back next week with Shannon Lee Simmons, founder of the New School of Finance and author of the new book, Worry-Free Money.